Hello, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I am your host, Artem, and Catherine Cook is here with us today to talk about season 2 of The Mandalorian, chapters 10 and 11. How are you today, Catherine?
Good.
Excellent, excellent. And so, chapter 10 is called The Passenger. And, we see that Din and Grogu are heading back to the base. We pick up right after they have come off of the slaying of the crate dragon. And, they're on a speeder bike. They're going through the sands of Tatooine. And there are these bandits that are setting up, a kind of trap for them where they kind of just it's the old school trap, isn't it? Like they're just stringing across the line. It's not complicated. This is not a complicated trap. But I imagine that there are a lot of people on speeder bikes who get caught in these traps if they are near any kind of rock formation or something. But we've seen this kind of trap in a lot of films and movies, and it does kind of trap them. He doesn't see that they're setting up this line to stop the speeder bike. So they crash, and they think that they can kind of outsmart Mando, which is very funny. Of course they can't. And this is one of the first scenes we see where the child kind of runs to Din, kind of like, and is kind of fearful and gets comfort in being back in Din's arms, which I thought was very interesting. But we also see where Din is like, he kind of negotiates with the guy. It's a total setup. And he tells him, hey, I've got some valuable things here if you let the child go, because this guy's holding a knife to Grogu's throat. And, this guy, he's so ignorant. He says, here, what do you want? Like, there's a lot of valuable stuff here. You could just take that and not even worry about the child. All your friends, I've just beat them up and they've been slayed and everything. And he kind of points to the jetpack. And and so he gives him the jetpack. And of course, Mando can control the jetpack using, his controls in his suit. And that guy gets killed. But, Din is kind of left in a difficult situation because he was on the speeder bike with a lot of stuff. And now, he doesn't have the speeder bike anymore because it's all destroyed and everything. And so we see sort of like Pat racked in, where he's got the bars. And at first I thought, why doesn't he use the jetpack to fly out of there? But then I thought maybe the stuff was just too heavy for him to carry. What do you think?
Well, he doesn't want to leave the bike and all the stuff behind.
Yeah, so he wouldn't be able to like use the jetpack as a to propel him. So there he is with this, getting the job done. Just carrying everything and just wrapping it up, and I just thought it was so funny. So he, it's several hours later, probably an entire day later, actually, that he finally joins Pele, and he doesn't even complain about this thing, which is kind of funny. I would be so annoyed. I would probably get in there and say, what happened to me? I can't believe that I'm in this position where, my speeder bike broke up and I was stranded out in the desert. But he doesn't do that. He sees Pele back in the cantina, and, they get into a discussion. She's sort of in the middle of a card playing game. And while she's in this card playing game, the stakes are high, and, she's kind of enjoying herself. But he intimates to her that, that he found this Mando armor, and she's questioning him about everything. And he says, oh, we killed a crate dragon. And she kind of, makes a sly remark that says, gee, is that all? Is that all you did? So then, she finally divulges to Mando that she has a contact that can tell him where to find other Mandalorians. And, that's kind of good news. Because honestly, while they're cooking, the crate meat, and Grogu's kind of watching it, and I love his face as he's watching it being cooked. Pele tells him that, oh, I should tell you that they don't, it's not, they need transport to another planet. And there are some conditions that have to be met in order for you to kind of move her to this planet. So he's like, well, what's up with this? He coyly remarks, I'm not a taxi service. But, this is another challenge. And the funny thing about this episode is that, it started to become the adventures and misadventures of of the child in the Mandalorian. Here was this lady. We finally get to see who she is, and if she is a frog, everybody calls her the Frog Lady. I'm sure there's a species name for her, but she's carrying her spawn, which are eggs, and because of this, they can't use the hyperdrive and have to travel sublight. So, Din is very clear and says the reason why I'm safe right now is because I always use the hyperdrive. Like, I can't travel sublight. This is insane. This is ridiculous. And they said, well, you have to, because if you don't, it will kill her eggs. And I thought that was very interesting. I had no idea that there were, organisms that were sensitive to a hyperdrive, to traveling at the speed of light. And I thought that was very interesting. I've never heard of that before, but there's a first time for everything. So she comes up and she has to get to this planet by a certain time, because those eggs are going to hatch. And her husband is waiting for there on this gas giant, and she wants Mando to take her there. And her husband is waiting, and it turns out that her husband is the one who may have information about other Mandalorians, because Din is still looking for that. And so as soon as the eggs pop out, we hear this Grogue's theme music.
Wasn't Pele running a scam at the card table?
She probably was. I mean, it
seemed like she was trying to play that guy. I thought that was kind of funny. And the fact that his whole escapade with the Krayt Dragon didn't lead him anywhere because there were no Mandalorians. And he was like kind of bummed out, and she kind of chided him for that, which was pretty funny.
She really did. I mean, after all, that was an enormous feat. And, this is all he has to show for it. That's how she kind of looks at it. Like, I think she's kind of looking at him as if his intentions or his direction is a little misguided. And perhaps she's a little right about that.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking this whole thing, how the Frog Lady just conveniently happens to know somebody with Mandalorian. Like, this might be a trap, Like, this is kind of, I don't know if Din should be necessarily buying into this.
It was very foolish of him, wasn't it? He right now, he's not even in the best position right now. He's not at his best, and he is incredibly vulnerable. And, I almost wonder, at this point, what he should be doing. He has a certain sense of urgency to find other Mandalorians and find other Jedi. But he also, I even wonder, Catherine, is it necessary for him to find other Mandalorians? I mean, why couldn't he just seek out a Jedi on his own? I guess
they're all gone.
Yeah. And also the other thing too, is maybe he wants to seek out other Mandalorians because he wants to feel that kinship again. He knows that if he can find another Mandalorian, he can say, oh, by code, we're a team. And,
so far he doesn't, as what we'll see in the next one, he's not really into that. He doesn't really want to find kinship yet. He just wants to basically dump the kid.
Yeah. And, but I'm suspecting that he feels that he needs to have some other allies with him, and that this roaming alone isn't doing him any good. Kind of being out there on his own, and, No,
I don't know, because he was very happy working for Grief Karga, and he's going to flatly reject the new friends he's going to meet in the next one.
Well, that is very true. But since he has this package with him, it gives him a vulnerability having this child. So now all of a sudden he doesn't have to just worry about himself. He has to worry about the kid. And so I'm guessing, maybe he's thinking, yeah, maybe in case something happens, there has to be somebody that I can call on. And also I think that I'm not quite sure his relationship with the clan back on in the Enclave, it wasn't, he had somebody who was guiding him. So now he's kind of like making these decisions, and there's no one to sort of like bounce it back on. So, even describing it to somebody outside of the clan, it just doesn't make any sense. But in the clan, if he were to describe to somebody, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, like they wouldn't be like, well, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. But if you told an ordinary person that, they'd be like, that's so weird. What are you talking about? But Mandalorians are not like this. And so I'm almost wondering if he wants to do something where he would bounce that information off of somebody and say, this is what I'm doing. And we kind of do see that in not in episode 10, but we do see something like that in 11. But, I think that he's realizing that this is not the easiest thing to accomplish. And now he's incredibly desperate because he's, taking this woman who's perfectly harmless to this other planet. And I'm almost wondering that Pele was paid by this woman for this transport. But she's maybe didn't give Mando the money for it. But
Probably.
yeah, he ends up transporting this woman, and
She was in the cantina before then in the previous episode, or the episode before then in the season 1.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, she was in it when he first arrived on Tatooine in the first season. She's in the cantina at the bar, or at one of the booths or whatever.
And I'm guessing that Tatooine really is just not an appropriate planet for her to have her children on. It seems like she needs a water-based planet or some kind of moisture for these children, for her eggs to keep them moist, and just for them to even thrive and grow up in a water or aquatic environment. So her husband finding this particular planet that is water-based, which we will see in the next episode after chapter 10, is essential for her so that they can grow. But she wants him to take her there. And, these eggs are suddenly a very important part of this story, because once Grogu sees these eggs, all of a sudden he's mesmerized by them. And, and they look to him like a tasty snack, I guess is the best way to say it. And so essentially, Mando tells, once they all get on board, he tells the frog lady, well, we're traveling sublight, so it's a little different than traveling in hyperdrive. So just to be careful. And, at this point, exactly what happens is Grogu discovers the eggs, and he peers into the holder, and he uses the force to kind of pull the eggs towards him. And while everybody is in bed, Grogu ends up eating the eggs, which is not a surprise. He was completely mesmerized by them. But I guess this is the type of stuff he would eat anyway, wherever, his species is from. Eggs might be part of it. I mean, it's part of my diet. So
we can't eat frogs.
Exactly. So this is very interesting and kind of a difficult situation. So this is where it really starts to get good. Somehow, because he's in sublight and not traveling on hyperdrive, the Republic X-Wing fighters see him. And it's obviously, at first you can't tell who is piloting the X-Wings, but they kind of intercept him. They find him because he's traveling in sublight. And he isn't, Din is not running a beacon on the Razor Crest, and he tells him it's not required because I am, this is a pre-Republic ship or a pre-Empire ship. I don't have to do it. It's like just a little transport ship. But of course they recognize this ship, don't they? Even before a transponder is on, they know that this is Dindajarn. They know that he's a Mandalorian. They know that they have a lot of information on him, which they're not telling him they have. And he knows this too. But of course, Din would have never encountered these guys if he was in hyperspace, right? Or hyperdrive.
Right.
So, this is one of the things he was trying to avoid. And, he goes ahead and is forced to turn on his transducer or transposer or whatever it's called. And he transmits, the signal to the two X-Wings. And, they're immediately know, even more now who he is. And when he does this, we find that he, doesn't want to stick around to see what's going to happen. Because, technically speaking, he could be in some serious trouble because of what happened in the previous season. So he decides to try and outrun the X-Wing fighters. Now, these X-Wing fighters are a much better ship than the Razor Crest. Why would he think he could outrun these two X-Wing fighters?
Because there's no information that says the Razor Crest is slower than an X-Wing.
Okay. Oh,
So
that's very interesting.
He's take off, and he's a really good pilot. And I don't know if he thinks that they necessarily want to kill him, because they shoot at him, but they don't fire their torpedoes at him. It's like they want to they force him into a controlled crash landing in one of the canyons. And then they just kind of, I guess they keep doing flybys after that for a while, trying to find him.
And they know he's there. See, this is the thing that's very funny about it, is that, I guess maybe he feels he can hide out, but they know he's there and they're not going anywhere. And then we, of course, at that point, I think we see that the two pilots are. Do we see who the pilots are? I don't remember if we see who the pilots
Not
are.
until the end of the episode when they come out of the X-Wings.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because, Mando has damaged his ship very badly now by landing on this ice planet in the way he did. He thinks he's in a stable platform and it's not, and he kind of falls lower, and it's very, very bad. In fact, it's so bad that he's actually kind of, and I'm not even quite sure if I can get it all together in one way, but he's kind of resigned himself to hunkering down because his ship is so damaged, and he's in a bad way. And he kind of tells the frog lady, look, let's just hunker down. This is really bad. We're in a bad state. And the frog lady's not having any of this. She can't communicate with him properly because he doesn't speak his language and she doesn't speak his. And so she kind of jerry rigs the parts that are left from that droid from Zero on the ship. And she's like, hey, don't worry. I didn't activate this robot. I'm using his translator so that you can understand what I'm saying. And she's like, you need to fix this ship and get us the hell out of here now. And, she's like, your Mandalorian code dictates that, you have to honor your promise and get the ship fixed, and you have to, honor the code of your Mandalorian ancestors. So Grogu and Mando are kind of like, can hear all of this. And Mando gets up and starts to, dusts himself off and, gets some, power coupling, starts to get on there and try to fix the ship. And so we hear, as Mando's outside, we can see Grogu kind of peering up on him and talking to him. And, in whatever way he communicates with Mando, he's telling him something, and Mando's like, hey, why don't you come and help me fix the ship? And, I thought that was very funny. Of course, that's going to be a foreshadowing to what happens in the future. But, as he's telling him this, I noticed that Grogu was trying to tell Mando something, and Mando's like, hey, come back here. He follows him out. And, I kind of love this scene because Grogu was saying, hey, the frog lady came out of the ship and she walked down this way, she's kind of left the ship. And, I'm thinking, Mando is like, well, this is not the safest place to kind of be leaving the ship right now. This ice is here. We don't know what's on here. And, Grogu kind of messages him sort of like saying he went in this direction and kind of points in that way. And Mando uses his viewfinder on his helmet to see her heat signatures, to see where she would be. And we see the frog lady is in this bathing pool, and she has to go there because it's so cold now on the Razor Crest, since they don't have an atmosphere anymore inside the crest. It's not pressurized properly. They're exposed to the elements. And she finds this warm bathing pool on this ice planet to heat up the frog eggs. And, I think it's very interesting. People were kind of like saying, well, can Grogu talk to Mando? I think they can figure out what each other need at certain moments.
You could tell that a significant amount of time has passed because he wasn't verbal like at all in the first season. And now he's it's clear that he's trying to say something just in a language that he doesn't,
Yeah, exactly. And, they do find her bathing. And he actually tells her, I know you're warm now, but it's going to get colder out here. So you really need to come in and get back to the ship. You really can't do that. And he of course has to tell Grogu to stay away from the eggs again. And then we hear Grogu's theme, and here he goes off again with his mischievous ways. He finds these pods, which are inside one of the caves there. And the pods do look like eggs, shaped like an egg. And he opens them, he tears it open, and it's a baby spider, and he eats that too. So apparently he eats spiders as well. And of course, it's the lair of this ice spider that we see that chases them. And, Grogu runs and he's scared, and Mando runs and he's scared. And the frog lady, she actually hops out of there.
It's really cool. Is that the ice spiders from the Jettison design of the Dagobah spiders, which were really tall and really interesting looking, like not like your average spiders. And it's like they're doing you look at all the eggs are arranged, like this kind of looks like all of the facehugger eggs on the on the ship in Alien, and how Grogu's kind of he breaks open the egg, he's kind of peering inside it. It's like, and it did happen, like the thing jumped out at first, it jumped on his face. Oh, that was really funny. But of course he's gonna eat them anyway, and at that point also the frog lady was like aware that he had been eating the eggs, because she's like pulling them closer to her and then the pull away from him. Like even when the spiders are coming and Mando's like, what the hell are you guys doing here? And Grogu's trying to reach in and like grab it and eat it. I'm surprised that a lot of people got upset by that he was eating the eggs. I thought it's like, he's a baby. He's just, he's hungry. He didn't know. He's just,
Yeah, I agree with you. I was surprised people responded to that in a negative way. It was really just a light thing that happened. And, there was really, obviously the eggs are gone, but, she has other eggs. So, there will be more of her spawn that will come out of those eggs. So, but it was a very interesting moment. She is protecting these eggs now because she knows that Grogu is in pursuit of them. And now they're being pursued by this spider, which is enormous and very powerful. And I think at first they just saw the young spiders sort of hatching out of the eggs, which they all seem to come out at one moment. And they are completely outnumbered. And they certainly are, or at least it feels like they might be outgunned by this spider. He's huge. He's powerful. The ship doesn't have any integrity. So when they flee into the ship, they're hiding in there, and all the spiders are pretty much coming in every hatch everywhere. And, I guess Din is like, okay, I've got to see if this engine runs, if we can get out of here. And he tries, and it looks like they're going to get out, but then that spider just hunkers down on them. And fortunately, and this is not a surprise, those Republic fighters are still around. And I'm sure they could hear the shooting, the noises of the weapons. And, they rescue them. And they tell him, yeah, we ran your transponder message and found out that there's a warrant for your arrest. But, as you and I've said before, what's worked in his favor is that he's given them 4 individuals who were wanted. And Din also went ahead and tried to protect Davin. And so Mando is like, are you saying I'm under arrest? And they're saying, technically you are. And of course, this is where we see it's Dave Filoni. And I know that other guy, he's kind of famous in the fandom.
Yeah, Paul Sun-Hun Lee.
Yeah. And, I'm so glad he was cast as a pilot. I think that's so cool that he got that. And then they tell him, yeah, technically speaking, yes, you should be arrested, but these are trying times. And I think that they hope that by being in contact with Din or having some kind of, it's not going to be worth their while to bring him in as a prisoner. Like it just, and I think that that's a very interesting, way of doing things. I'm glad that they did not want to do that. But Mando says, in exchange for me bringing in 4 wanted prisoners, could I, forfeit my bounty on that? And you guys could help me fix the ship? And they're like, no. No. And so they say, hey, make sure you have that transponder on so we don't mistake you for a former Imperial. Just make sure you have that on in the future. And they just want to track him and see what he's up to. I guess they realized that if he really wanted to have caused havoc, he could have released all the prisoners from that ship if he wanted to. So, Mando gets the cabin pressurized, but let's be honest, the ship is turned into a bucket of bolts at this point. And as they're approaching the gas giant, what we notice is that not only is the ship on its last leg and pieces are flying off, but he has to manually enter the atmosphere. And, they do it, but it's really like an uncontrolled plunge. And right as they get onto the landing platform, we see that, and I kind of jumped ahead, there was a kind of a cute scene. Yeah, the ship really does fall into the water after they get on that landing platform. But despite the frog lady trying to protect or keep those eggs away from Grogu, he manages to snag another one, because he's got, I even wonder, he probably just did it while she was sleeping.
Yeah.
And went over there and
he did save him at one point from one of the spiders as well.
Yes, exactly. I mean, he just, can get into a lot of mischief. And my mother was like, he's not an ordinary child. This is the type of stuff you'd have to deal with him, and you'd have to be ready to deal with it. And I'm like, that's a lot to deal with. But yeah, the ship just falls into the water, and of course he's at a shipyard and they pull it out, but it looks terrible. Like the ship is so damaged. And he talks to the shipwright there, and he says, yeah, I could make it fly. And it just is in such bad shape. So he gives the guy, can you please see if you can fix it for us? And of course, the great part is the frog lady gets reunited with her husband. I mean, I felt that was one of the most wonderful parts. And a lot of people, talked about that. What did you think of the frog lady?
At first it's a bit suspicious, and then when they did the whole egg eating thing, I thought it was kind of funny. And then she's like reunited with her husband. It's like, okay, that's nice, a little, but it does have even a little bit of a payoff as well.
It really does. And and the frog lady's husband is so gracious to Mando and thanks him and says, thank you for bringing, my wife and my children, my spawn here. And, Mando's like, you said you've seen Mandalorians, where should I go? He points him to this inn, which is this local inn, which is there. And something very interesting that we see is that someone sees them arrive, and they're sort of like a cloaked woman, an attractive looking cloaked woman is peering in and watching them. And, there was so much speculation as to who this woman was. I think she might have been in the trailer, but I couldn't remember. So many people thought that she was a Jedi. Who did you think the woman in the black cloak was when you first saw the trailer? And
I didn't have any particular thoughts on who it was. Like, oh, okay, it's a person. Somebody watching him.
Yeah, someone was watching him. They wanted to keep a distance. They didn't necessarily want him to know they were watching him. But he, someone had their sights on him, and, you couldn't tell who, whether they were a Jedi or what the story was, but there was so much speculation as to who she was. So that was kind of interesting. And to finally see her on this planet, we knew he was going to have an encounter with her there. Din takes Grogu into, this eating establishment, and there's that funny scene with the octopus on Grogu's face. He's like, oh, what is this thing? So Mando goes in and asks, have you guys seen any other Mandalorians? Or, is there anybody else who looks like me there? And the innkeeper tells him he knows someone, a ship's captain, who can take him to a place where he finds it. But this also feels 100% like a trap. Like this one, I'm like, really? This is getting, going
too many conveniences.
Yes, really. And so after they eat, they get on board this ship, and, you can see, they tell him, oh, there's this really interesting sea creature we have in the hold. I have a feeling that your little one would love to see it. And, it's like, of course it ends up as a trap. What I liked about this scene was after Grogu gets swallowed by the sea creature, of course, Mando jumps in after him, and they trap him, and, they're all kind of like, he's in this cage of water, and they're all kind of like poking at him with these, I guess, spears. And Mando uses his jetpack to kind of push himself out of the water. And I'm like, oh, that's convenient. I don't remember seeing anyone use a jetpack like that. I didn't know that operated underwater. So, that was another use of the jetpack that I've never seen before. And I know that they do have torches underwater. I know that that's true, but I've never seen anybody use a jetpack, a Mandalorian jetpack underwater. So I was like, wow, he's using it to float to the top. Maybe he can get out. The things look kind of dire for him. And, he really didn't have a way to sort of get out of that cage, which was, very sturdy. And of course, this is where, your spirits lift up, because out of nowhere, you see a Mandalorian flying in, and it's like, yes, of course we had this anticipation of it, but I was so happy to see that. They show up, they save Din and Grogu. And you can immediately recognize Bo-Katan's armor. I have to say that they recreated her in live action to perfection. What did you think?
Yeah, it's the same actress, and that's why it looks also the same, because they animated the character based on her as well when they did Rebels. So yeah, that looks pretty good.
Yes, they really did. And ironically, I saw Sackhoff in a Hallmark movie this past weekend. She made a Hallmark movie called I think it had something to do with sailing, and it was pretty good. I can't remember the name of it. It might be like Christmas Sail or something like that. And I was like, wait a minute, I recognize this woman. And here she is in a Hallmark film, which I'm seeing a lot of stars making these Hallmark films recently, which is very interesting. But things seemed very good at this point because it looked like Din had found some other Mandalorians. Clearly, these are Mandalorians. They saved him. They took him out of this. And things were looking pretty good. But then here we go again. When they removed their helmets, it's like Din lost it. Like he was like, "Oh, you're not a true Mandalorian." Like all these accusational comments, and I'm like, "Hey." In my mind, I'm like, Din, just calm down. This isn't cool, man. Just feel the moment for a second. They just saved you. Obviously, they don't have harmful intentions to you. And that's when we learn, or at least he's been told by someone verbally, by Bo-Katan, that he's a child of the Watch. She's like, I'm Clan Vizsla, but you are a child of the Watch. And, you're part of this group that's been separated and, want to live by I guess the purest form of this, the lore of Mandalore or whatever the code is. And, I'm not surprised that Din was upset by this, but I think, he could have taken a little breather and not kind of run away from them, because they might have had the information. Even if they are not true Mandalores, that doesn't mean that he has to run away from them. Why do you suppose he did run away from them in that way? Like just really kind of abruptly run?
Because it's like the guy mentioned who was with her. I can't remember his name. He was standing on the right, and he's like, "Oh, he's one of them." He's very much in the cult, and it's just too jarring for him to, on the one hand, see them fighting like Mandalorians and working as a team like Mandalorians do, but then they just kind of casually take off their helmets, and he just doesn't. He can't grasp that. It's like being confronted with the irrationality of your own beliefs, and then people get defensive and they take off, and that's exactly what he did.
So he's been so indoctrinated by the Watch and how they run things that it's just to break the shell and kind of have him open his eyes a bit more to what's going on. And so it's very interesting. He finds himself in a position once again where he's indebted to them in a way. He goes back on shore with Grogu and is confronted by the sailor's brother, who then says, "You killed my brother." And and of course, Bo-Katan and her crew show up, and she's like, "Yeah, what are you going to do about it? Like, how you like me now," kind of thing, And so Bo convinces, after, they kind of sit down together, and Din, I think he's still very unnerved by what's happened, but at this point he can't deny that they've had his back now.
Yeah.
And she convinces Din to help her now that he's disclosed what he's trying to do. I'm looking for a Jedi. This child has to be returned to a Jedi. They're not impressed or surprised or shocked or anything really, but they want his help. And I think that's very interesting. So is it presumably, can we presume, Catherine, that they've heard of him and they've heard what he did?
Probably by this point, it sounds like it, because the fact that he was traveling by sublight speeds from Tatooine, and I don't think that Tatooine is that far from Sorgan and Orvala 7 and such. So this is kind of, word's getting around. And when you consider the sheer amount of bounty hunters who had tracking fobs to find him and how they travel all over the place as well. So I think they've probably heard that, he's out here somewhere. They could have been there also trying to, put out feelers while they were in the bar. Hey, see the Mandalorian, kind of steer him this way. And he listens to their pitch about how they want to, seize this ship because this guy's been using his Imperial equipment to attack Mandalore and to persecute Mandalorians. And first Dindajarn kind of brushes him off, saying, "Oh, Mandalore's a cesspit. It's like, it's gone." And she brushes him off too. She's like, "Yeah, that's just Imperial propaganda to keep us separated because they know we're a threat when we're together." And he still isn't very enthused by these people, but he realizes he doesn't really have any other leads at this point. And this is where I thought that he not only does he agree to go with him, I thought this next joke was really funny, where he goes to the frog lady's house, and it's like, of all the people they probably didn't want to see standing at their door, Grogu coming to eat more eggs. And
He's like,
"Can you
be
watch the kid?"
respectful. You
Yeah.
know what I mean.
It's like, yeah, can you watch the kid? Okay.
Yeah, you be respectful. You know what I mean, Grogu. You be respectful. And he immediately goes into the frog lady's house and goes for the eggs. And I thought, oh my God, he's going for it again. I can't believe this. But we'll get back to that in a minute. Oh, this kid.
Well, at least this time there, he's kind of just, he's kind of looking at it, and they're kind of watching him. So
They are, and he's looking at the eggs really really intently, and of course they start to hatch, and his eyes open up, and I'm thinking he's thinking, a bigger meal, like only God knows what this kid is thinking. But he does see the eggs emerge, and they're perfectly willing to take care of him, and they know he's a handful. So I think they can be firm with him and get by. But it's very interesting how Bo-Katan kind of pleads her case with Din about this. And, I think that she uses a bit, even though he is weary of them, she uses a bit of this Mandalore brotherhood thing to sway him, because she doesn't tell him everything about the heist. And honestly, there's too much to tell him in the amount of time they're allotted. She can't tell him the history of where she is. She does mention that that they have something she needs to have so that she can rule Mandalore, more or less. I'm paraphrasing, but she says there's something I need if I'm going to rule Mandalore, and they know where it is. And of course, that's something I'm assuming, Catherine, is the Darksaber, correct? And so we've already seen the Darksaber in the end of season 1. I'm kind of wondering to myself, why she didn't say everything, but I think it just would have been overload for Din at this point. So while he's surprised at certain things, it wouldn't even sink into him. He may not even know, he doesn't even know what the Darksaber is, right? Because he acquires
right,
it.
but I don't think she even wants him to know about that aspect of it, because they weren't very taken with his, the fact that he's one of them. And it's like they realize they need his help for his skills and to have more numbers, but I don't think they would want him to know that the Darksaber was involved. I don't think they'd want to lose it to him at this point.
And the fact that she even could feel or suspect or be fearful that there was even a chance that she could lose it to him is very intriguing. And I kind of still wonder, although there really isn't any basis for this, but I kind of still wonder who Dindajarn really is. In other words, we know he's a child of the Watch, but is there something more to his background that, makes him significant? So I'm kind of wondering that, and I'm kind of hoping we get an answer to that in the upcoming years. But perhaps Din doesn't realize his ancestry, and there is something significant about him and his ancestry. So getting back to this, what's really interesting is Din totally stands out, as we already know, with his shiny Beskar armor. And I'm sure that when Bo-Katan saw the armor, she noticed that right away. Not that she would have had trouble recognizing a Mandalorian, but the power behind the Beskar. And it's almost like reinvigoration of the importance of a Mandalorian. Having a Mandalorian that's wearing pure Beskar, or a very, very high level of Beskar armor, will bolster even them mentally, not just, having an extra person, but mentally, this is bolstering them. We can do anything if we have the right tools. Weapons are part of our religion, and this is an extreme weapon that, he has. And wow, look at how far we can go. And I think that bolsters her when she sees him, even if he is a child of the Watch. She realizes that this guy, it's almost like he's this pure individual. He's not an angel, but it's almost like, well, his motivations aren't, let me take anything I can get right now. His motivations are the welfare of a child, and she can exploit that because, he has a foundling, more or less. And so she realizes that he has this foundling, and she's like, this is going to be even better for us. So, she plays on the heartstrings. They get him, he joins the team. They get on board this Imperial ship, post-Imperial ship, new
Yeah,
Imperial ship,
she
whatever.
she is a bit what would be the right word for that? The fact that she is trying to exploit the kid to get what she wants. It's like, you know.
Yeah, and Bo-Katan is very clever, and I think she's the type of person who can handle any situation. And as I said, like her world ended, like Mandalore ended, but she can handle it. It's like, is there anything this woman can't handle? And just keep going. Like she just, is so incredibly well trained and experienced, and understands the politics of the universe, but can also handle a situation like this, which is a delicate situation. If something happens to that child, it's like game over. You know what I mean? So, she says, okay, we're gonna get the ship. They do a great job getting on the ship. They're competent. 4 Mandalorians is like an army. They get on there. Those stormtroopers don't stand a chance. They're very ignorant of the Mandalorians. Why are they so ignorant of the firepower? Let's say this team. Are they new stormtroopers? The captain seemed very terrified of them.
Yeah, the captain's he's got more seniority, so he's probably aware of them. Maybe he's been on a detail of Mandalore, but the others might not have been. So they're like, oh, who are these guys? And this is not a big deal. They haven't heard of Beskar and all that kind of stuff.
And we even see, I love the fighting scenes. Of course, they're going to be wonderful because they're Mandalorians. But one scene that I liked a lot was when they were sort of trapped in the hallway, and there was no way for them to kind of get out of that formation. They could have been there forever, just firing at each other, and, once again, Din takes it, straight up, in the Beskar. He gets hit in the Beskar, and he just gets pummeled. And you just know that their armor would not sustain that. And, I think it's very interesting in that sense that, not all armor is created equal, obviously, but he takes the hit and they notice that. And he's just doing this to get himself through so he can get to the next step and get that information from Bo-Katan. The captain or admiral, or whatever his ranking was, killed himself. Yeah. I thought that was a bit extreme. Like he could have just gotten an escape pod, right?
I guess, escape pod probably just dump him in the water and then they'd come and get him there. And it's like, he's not going to sell out his boss. And he probably knows the consequences for doing so. And he seems to be a bit of a fanatic. And given the project that Moff Gideon seems to be working on, then it makes sense that there's fanaticism in those ranks.
Yes. And was there something special, a special weapon on the ship that we know of, Catherine, or we're expecting? Because, I'm just kind of curious. I don't know. But the stakes of him killing himself over this ship, seemed pretty high. And I wonder if there are other things on board other than weapons that they were.
I think it's also the fact that I think he knew he was outmatched. Like they're going to get the ship one way or another at this point, and I'm screwed. They're either going to kill me or my boss is going to kill something, and he doesn't want that. So he just kind of he doesn't want to be like coerced into giving information. So he just takes himself out.
Well, if they were creating a fear scenario of Moff, let's say if Moff is the boss that he's fearing, but we suspect is, they certainly have, done that. This man survived, presumably, the rise and fall of the Empire, but he's not going to survive the wrath of Moff by losing this particular ship. So I think it's also that because of who Bo-Katan is, because she's not just a random Mandalorian, she's known on Mandalore. And since Moff Gideon, of course, has the Darksaber, and he was the guy who obviously was involved in the Purge of Mandalore, he's going to know that name. And he's like, you lost the ship to who? It might not so much be what's on the ship. It's just the fact that, she bested them again. And he doesn't want that. Like, he is the type of guy who we saw was very direct. Like, when he showed up on all of a sudden, he's like, you have something I want. He's just very direct, cuts to the chase. He doesn't want to dance around the bushes. And it's like, you lost the ship. Okay, so you lost all this to her. So now we're going to have reprisals from her, that kind of thing. So, deep level fanaticism and fear-based there. And with that, they themselves it's almost like a cult in that case,
Mm-hmm.
where, you have such dedication to this. And to be honest with you, some of these guys don't really they didn't have anything to live for outside of the Empire, did they?
No, it's like that's a way for a lot of people to get off of their, backwater worlds, just go work for the Empire.
And so, this was his life, his career. Obviously, he rose through the ranks. And as far as he's concerned, he's still, a ranking officer, if you will, or commander. And even if the Empire isn't the Empire anymore under the way they remember it, for them, the idea of the Empire is still alive. So, we're going to be confronted with that a lot, even though it fell, already. So after they secure the ship, and there's some very clever scenes where, they're inside of the, I guess, the bay, the landing bay of the ship, and then they kind of just push them out, using air or opening it up unexpectedly, and everybody falls out.
Mm-hmm.
Bo-Katan is very happy that she's secured this ship. Originally it was the weapons that Din thought he was going to be helping them get, but it's an actual ship. And the funny thing about it is that she feels compelled to ask him to join the fight. Now, I think that was interesting because I guess she would be forced to extend the invitation just out of courtesy alone. You can join us whenever you like, but she knew he was going to turn it down, didn't she?
Yeah, I think she knew he was going to turn it down, but I think she might have also been a bit more impressed at his skills. Like initially, she wanted him to add an extra number to their ranks, but he ended up being very like quintessential to them actually taking the ship, and she might have been like genuinely surprised by that.
And I'm not going to say it's well, yeah, maybe I am going to say this. She owes him a bit more than just the information, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Now, it's true that they rescued him twice, but honestly, what he's just done now, this tactical, sort of thing was just above and beyond. And so she does tell him, about Caladan and Corvus. You will find Ahsoka Tano. And so he has the information now. And so this is where things kind of feel like they've crossed or are taking a turn, because now we know that he knows about Ahsoka Tano. And of course, we know, presumably we're going to see Ahsoka Tano. So we knew we were going to. It's just that now the expectation of seeing her is there. And, and somewhat in a more immediate way, we know she's presumably alive. And, this season, seeing Ahsoka Tano for the first time in live action is a huge level of excitement for me. When were you expecting to see her? I think we see her. Is it 1 or 2 episodes forward?
2 forward.
Yeah. So, seeing her in live action is just, I think at this point, from this second on, that's what everybody is focused on, seeing Ahsoka Tano. So it's great to hear those words coming out of her mouth. And of course, when I heard her, I was like, yes, of course, they know each other well. And, for those of us who've watched the Clone Wars, have seen, their association with one another, and in the same year, seeing even further association with each other in season 7. So, which actually might be the first time that they met. I can't remember if they met before season 7, but it is very interesting to see that. And of course, this was obviously many years later since season 7 occurred that, we would be seeing them now. So, but what was your overall thoughts of these 2 episodes? Do you felt that it led into...
Well, he does go back first because he says no. He goes back to pick up the kid. And it's funny because the one of the tadpoles or whatever is since hatched, and Grogu's kind of playing with it, and the mom or the dad is sitting there watching Grogu, and I'm like, do they realize that the reason the kid probably is playing with it because he's thinking about, should I eat it now or should I eat it later? type thing.
And he doesn't want to leave, does he?
No, because like Din sees what's going on, so he immediately walks in and grabs the kid, picks him up, and the kid's like reaching, no, give me the and they just kind of wave to him as he leaves, and it's like, oh god, that was really funny. And
it was hilarious. I mean,
then they go back to their ship that this guy in the knit sweater has put back together, and they're gonna take off, and then there was like one more spider, I think, that was still inside, and it started coming down on Grogu's looking at it. He's kind of excited, like and like really enamored by it, and then, like it's gonna bring him treats or something. And then Din like turns around and sees it, and he just squishes.
And it's really funny because as you said, the guy, the shipwright guy, has definitely fixed the ship somehow.
Yeah. Tying together all we can't get this sheet metal we don't have the welding tool, so we'll just get a bunch of fishnets to tie it in and hold it together,
I mean, it's certainly, I would call it jerry-rigged.
Yeah.
It's still foobar, but it's flyable, which is a little bit better than it was before. But this is not ideal to be taking, doing interstellar travel. Like this would never pass, a vehicle inspection.
I think that's probably why instead of going straight to Ahsoka, he goes back to Navarro first.
Navarro, yes.
He'll, as we'll discuss next time, that he's gonna go get some much needed official repairs.
And we're talking like he's traveling in space, and you just know the bolts are flying off as they're going through the vacuum.
Yeah.
So it's very funny. He got the job done, but he's kind of like, you want me to go in space in that like that? And the guy's like, hey, it'll fly. Like that guy probably could fix anything if he had the right tools. He could make it shiny like new. But you work with
the Razor Crest flyable in space says it speaks volumes to his talents.
Absolutely. To be honest with you, I didn't think it could fly when I saw what he was doing, but I'm like, whatever you do, don't cut any of those cords. Right. So honestly, these episodes were a lot of fun to watch. Yeah. And, I think that Grogu's adorableness definitely added to it. And frankly, I was just thrilled to see more Mandalorians. That really was, a big wish. And after all, the series is called The Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably more of what people thought they were going to see. It's true, season 1, we saw more Mandalorians. It's just that I think a lot of fans were hoping for tons of Mandalorians, like really just that experience of the clans together, or maybe, how the clans got back together and tried to reestablish Mandalore or something like that.
I think that's where the series is ultimately going to be going.
Exactly. And so now even hearing those words come out of Bo-Katan's mouth, was very satisfying to kind of like hear her talk about, well, I need it to be in charge of Mandalorian. And it's like, what? You want to get Mandalore back together and have them, like maybe not the same planet, but, just reestablish new Mandalore? That is fantastic. Like this, it becomes very exciting.
That opens another door of a question, that because Dindajarn was so surprised to see these 3 not, wearing the helmets and all that and everything she was telling him. It's like, I wonder what his impressions are of Mandalore, because she's obviously aware that there's multiple factions. There's Death Watch, there's the Children of the Watch, there's the pacifists on Mandalore. But he seemed very surprised to learn there were different factions. So I wonder what his, like, if they were to have asked him straight up, what do you think of Mandalore? Like before the Empire came along, it'd be interesting to see what his ideal version, or what he had been taught, to think about for Mandalore, because he's very much, very like, wow, this is all very new to him, it seems.
Well, it seems very clear he was told that Mandalore was cursed in order to keep him away from Mandalore. And
right, I think in the more recent years, yeah. But I was wondering, like, if in Mandalore, what his idea of Mandalore is in like its most purest form, like there must be the real hardline stance of the Mandalore. Like if they were to tell him about, because as we'll see later in the season, he's not necessarily too familiar with the whole Darksaber thing as we thought he was. Because obviously that's why Bo-Katan specifically didn't want to mention that to him, because she seemed to assume that because this guy's clearly a child of the Watch, then he's going to be a hardliner, and she didn't want to compete with that. But as we'll see later, he's not even very familiar with that. So it's actually really interesting that his understanding of what Mandalore would be in its purest form is something that's completely different from what it actually is.
And I love that. I absolutely love the fact that she does realize that he's not an ordinary Mandalorian, because he's not. And she's realizing it. He's got this incredible armor. He's got a child that he has to bring to a Jedi. What is going on with this guy?
Yeah. I noticed also that her focus was such on that ship, her eyes on the prize. She's not seemingly curious about the kid that much. She doesn't inquire, like, well, what's the, like, even Mando's former friends, if you call them that, from chapter 6, were very interested in the child and what's this all about. Whereas she doesn't care because she's just, okay, whatever, I'll help you if you need to help me type of thing. So that's also, and I think also in this episode they may have shown when Din and Grogu are like eating like soup and he lifts up his mask. And we've seen him do that before. Like in the 4th episode on Sorgan, he takes his helmet off to eat soup, but he's in private. We don't see his face, but we know that he's doing that. Whereas in this, I mean, I get that obviously he has to take the mask off every time he eats, but the fact that they're showing us this, it's kind of subliminally suggesting to the audience that he's might be on the way of getting, deprogrammed, if you will.
Well, for all practical purposes, or for at least that we know, his cult has been, disbanded, so to speak, at least now. And, now he has to kind of like question, he's not imparting his beliefs on anyone else because he can clearly see that there are other people who don't share the same beliefs. And he's been told verbally, you know what? Not everybody follows the same way you do, but this is my clan. And he recognizes that she's from a clan. And I don't know whether he's heard about Clan Vizsla. It's one of the most well-known clans, let's say in our lore, that we know as following Star Wars. But for him not to know, let's say, wouldn't it be surprising to you if he didn't know some of the most famous clans in the history of Mandalore? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, because I haven't been able to figure out like what planet he was on when he first was rescued and where that is. And seeing as the Children of the Watch are even more extreme than Death Watch in terms of how they're cult-like they are, I would imagine that they maybe deliberately separated themselves from the rest of them, like deep into the Outer Rim somewhere. Like, we don't want anything to do with you people because you're so they can't stand them, and the fact that they believe Mandalore's been destroyed is like, oh, we don't need to be there anymore anyway. And so for him not to know, I mean, yes, Clan Vizsla obviously is very important because rising to lead the Death Watch and the whole civil war of Mandalore. But if these Children of the Watch have been broken off and far away, then I kind of get that he hasn't really heard of it. If he's, I mean, the fact that he was as shocked as he was to even see that there was Bo-Katan and other Mandalorians like that tells you he's not been involved at all. I mean, I get that he was just a little child at the time of the Clone Wars, but the fact that he hasn't heard of the history or anything like that suggests that he's way off the beaten track, like way out there.
And we already know, like from the Clone Wars, you and I both know, and a lot of people watching this, but some people may not know, Bo-Katan's sister, Satine, right? She was the head of Mandalore. I mean, and her premise was, and I don't think that she disliked Mandalorians who were fighters. It's just that she was trying to Satine was trying to push an initiative of peace. And that included the idea that Mandalorians should sort of like lay down their arms against one another. In other words, Satine felt that there was way too much infighting, amongst the Mandalorians themselves. And the Empire was kind of bad for them because they kind of pushed the infighting, because they knew that they would just kind of die out and then they could take whatever resources from them. But I think it's interesting, maybe the Children of the Watch are the ones who follow more of what Satine wanted to. Obviously, they didn't lay down all their arms, but they certainly don't confront other people to get into fights. From what we can see, they hide out so people can't know their numbers, and they want to be hidden. They have to go out sometimes, but they want to be hidden so people didn't really know who they were, where they came from, and how many of them were there. They were living in a cave. They were living in an enclave underground, so people could never see them. There was a reason why they were doing this. And I guess maybe they took some of Satine's beliefs in, the best way for us to keep the peace is to maybe stay out of sight right now, and just to make sure that we don't infight with one another. Now, this is just speculation, but, it kind of seems like this might be the case because there had to be people who still believed that way, but they had to take their armor with them. They needed to defend themselves. So they adopted a way of maintaining being a Mandalorian, but not letting things get out of hand in their, from their point of view. At least it's how I think it is. I don't know for sure, but it seems like maybe they did do that. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting that, to have a discussion like this because, this political intrigue between Mandalorians, which has not ended. I'm sure there are still Mandalorians out there who are still against Bo-Katan, and believe that the Empire had it right. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were Mandalorians who were fighting on the side of the Empire against Bo-Katan. We haven't seen it, but I wouldn't be surprised, because we've seen it in the Clone Wars and how that kind of happened. It didn't work out well, but I wouldn't be surprised by that either. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. But is there anything else any other comments you had about these two chapters, Catherine?
Yeah, I like these two. They feel again like a part 1, part 2 type episode. With a nice, because the second one has really nice build up and it goes to good payoff. So I like these two. It's pretty fun.
I like them too. I like them as well. I thought that they flowed nicely together. I felt that we needed to have a little relief of the pressure from Mando with Grogu, just a little bit of fun, a little mischievousness that he gets into, which this is probably just scratching the surface. Mando's probably lost a lot of things because Grogu's done stuff, just like, with any kid who might do some things and, that are mischievous. So I think it was great to see that. I think it was also great to see, Grogu kind of run to Mando when he was scared. So we're seeing a little bit more of a different type of relationship between the two. You mentioned that Grogu was talking now, and we didn't see that earlier. He's getting more comfortable. Perhaps he's growing. I mean, I don't even know how much time has elapsed from one season to the next, but perhaps he's growing, and finally being out in the world. We really didn't know how long Grogu was in that enclave. We didn't know, who was even talking to him. Clearly he was being taken well care of, but now he's exploring the world. Very different. We knew he was in the Jedi Temple from Ahsoka, which we find out later on. But after the temple up to the enclave, we don't see him. So, we kind of get to see, we don't really know what happened from the Jedi Temple to the enclave when he's rescued by Din. So, that's a bit of a mystery, but I suspect that he probably has been in that enclave the whole time. This is just my thoughts. From the Jedi Temple to this enclave, this safe place. And he's been there, but it's not like interacting with the entire universe like he's doing now. Grogu is going out. He's seeing people. He's seeing things. He's having experiences that possibly he hasn't had before. We can't ever know, but I suspect that might be the case. And Din is kind of learning a little bit more about the politics of other Mandalorians, and that, while he did find a brotherhood in them, he is going to have to continue to barter to get whatever he needs. And now he's going into the turning point for him, where he just may find the person he has to surrender Grogu to. Will he be ready to surrender the child, Catherine?
We'll find out when we go.
Well, I think when he first found the child and found out he was going to be like a father to him, he was actually ready to surrender the child like that minute. But I suspect that his attachment, I know my attachment to the child is strong, so I didn't want him to surrender the child. So it's very interesting how this question of surrendering the child has come.
Yeah, I'm actually pressed for time, so I do actually need to go. So,
all right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Catherine. Where can people find you?
You can find me on the Phantasmagorium Show YouTube channel, Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns, Wednesday nights at 6. Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel, second and fourth Sunday of every month, hosting Unifying Force, and Slice Night at Twitter, Instagram. Cool. Okay.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Yes, thank you. This has been fun.
Yeah, it has been. And everybody, thank you for watching. You can find me on Positive Fandom here, and you can also find me on the Burr Network or Midnight Metal. You can also find me on Midnight's Edge and Toxic Femininity, and during the daytime on their Midnight's Edge on Fridays. And you can also find me on Uncivilized Scoundrels every other Thursday on the 1/6 Scale Man Network. Thank you so much for joining us, and join us for the next episode. And everybody, please be kind.